This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey now, welcome to a Monday edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. It's me, Michael Remis, here in the host chair. Hustler's away, Connor's away. I'll be here all week talking about the latest news around the Winnipeg Jets, Blue Bombers on the bye week, CFL, what a crazy weekend of games, Sea Bears, Gold Eyes, our home, NHL free agency, still some players trickling in that we're waiting to sign. Could we see some movement with trades as well? So thanks everyone to joining in. Shout out to Rick Benson, regular chatter. It's his birthday today. Big happy birthday to Rick. What a weekend it was. We had Nikolaj Ehlers press conference on Saturday, Friday, the Jonathan Toews announcement. We're going to have clips from all of them coming up. If you missed it Sunday, WST Sunday Live, Connor and Liz breaking down all of the news, development camp, Jets free agency, Toews and Ehlers. So check that out on podcast and YouTube. If you are here, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. Tells YouTube we're putting out some good content. Maybe it will show it to people who might be interested and help us grow the channel. All of our social media links in the description. We sent out a newsletter on Friday as well, showing off some of the top segments of the past week. So make sure you're signing up for that on our website, winnipegsportstalk.com. Or again, all of our links in the description. Got a great show coming up here. A couple guests. Darren Bauming, Bonfire Sports. He's been covering the Jets, but also the Blue Bombers, losing their first game of the year in the Stampede Bowl against Calgary on Thursday. The first ever Stampede Bowl. It was tough, man, seeing Calgary celebrate and lift that trophy. Familiar sight watching the visiting team lift a trophy after defeating the Blue Bombers. Mike McIntyre, the Winnipeg Free Press. So many Jets topics to get to. Free agency, development camp. He was on the conference call with Ehlers. Jonathan Toews press conference. We had players filing for arbitration as well. And finally, Daniel Fink. The Jets have made so many signings. Some of those signings will be trickling down to the Moose. Some of the players at development camp we just saw could be on the Moose this season. And some of the Moose players from last season could be on the Jets. So lots to talk about with Daniel Fink. Big thank you to the amazing sponsors who make this show possible. Rollies Transfer, St. Vital Dental, Canadian Club, Manitoba Battery, Princess Auto, Aikens Lake, F Apparel, Fans First, A Little Brown Jug, Boston Pizza, Royal Sports, and Cool Bet. Nikolaj Ehlers, finally some closure here on Nikolaj Ehlers, now member of the Carolina Hurricanes. He spoke to the media about his departure, had his introductory conference call introducing himself to Carolina and saying goodbye to Winnipeg. He spent 10 years here, the longest he's lived anywhere. And with free agency, he said he was looking for a new experience. He signed a 6-year deal with Carolina, $8.5 million AAV. And he started off the conference call saying why Carolina.
I'm very excited about the project. I'm very excited about the team in Carolina. They've been a tough team to play against in the past, and I like the all the young players that are there, and the interest that Carolina has shown was something that obviously helped a lot with the decision making. So it made me very excited.
There's Nikolaj Ehlers on the conference call. Shout out to the Hurricanes website for providing that. So he said the move was about the fit and the opportunity to join a contender. Nothing that the Jets really did wrong. And here's Ehlers on why he fits in with Carolina.
I think my speed, the stress game that Carolina plays in the sense when they don't have the puck, for example, trying to get the puck back as quick as possible. I think my speed, I'm able to do that. I think with my speed, I can create a lot of room for the other guys as well, and I believe that I will fit in very nicely. And that's obviously something you look at as well when you try to make a decision. But, I talked to Rod and we had kind of the same vision about how things are going to go. And again, the talks that I've had with the people in the Canes organization is something that really excited me.
There's Nikolaj Ehlers excited by the opportunity ahead. I do see some in chat. Miller Time said he could have had a statue. Never would have needed to buy a drink ever in Winnipeg. Many great contributions to the Jets throughout his career. 674 games, 225 goals, 295 assists, 520 points. Exciting player. Unique player, and because of so much time here, he talked about the difficulty in making such a decision.
Very emotional. Obviously, I'm very excited to join the Canes organization. At the same time, I'm also sad to believe in an organization that helped me achieve my dream of being an NHL player. And, I've been in Winnipeg for 10 years, been a part of the organization for 11, and created a lot of great relationships and, on and off the ice. So, Chevy, Chipman, Arnie, I talked to those three guys yesterday, and it was very emotional. I had a lot of things to say. I had a lot of thank yous to that I needed to get out because, these guys and that organization is top notch. And, I told them, why I made the decision that I made, and they obviously respected it and were happy for me. At the same time, I've been there for 10 years. So it was very emotional. I love, the organization. I'll always hold the city of Winnipeg very close to my heart. It's the place I've lived the longest, my whole life. So, it was some very good conversations, and there's a lot of people that I won't ever forget.
Holds Winnipeg close to his heart. It was certainly a tough decision that he spent more time than your average free agent does. Usually July 1, doors open, flurry of signings, but Ehlers took his time and wanted to make sure that he was in a place that was the right fit for him. Actually, Carolina Hurricanes GM Eric Tulsky was asked when he became confident that Ehlers would sign with Carolina.
Got the call saying he was signing with us. It he had a lot of teams interested in him. He's a great player. I think in the end, for him, if he just wanted the most money he could have gotten more for sure. My understanding is he was looking for the place that felt like the right fit, where he'd be happy, where he'd have a chance to win. And it turns into a recruiting pitch then. And, it's a personal decision for him, what feels right to him. All we can do is present the information we have about our team and help him understand why we think he would enjoy it here and wait for his decision.
Interesting comments from Eric Tulsky saying Ehlers could have got more from another team, but what's important to him when choosing a destination was fit. So certainly, I think stings for Jets fans for a player of his caliber to be moving on, but we needed to hear from Nikolaj Ehlers to get that closure. And there were some media reports saying, does he want to go to a quieter market? Is that what it was? And here's the Ehlers response to the reports that it was the media that was the reason why he wanted to move.
It wasn't the media. I love you guys.
I know.
No, I mean, I wouldn't put it that way. Like I said, I've been in Winnipeg for 10 years. And, I don't think I ever was in any way, bad during the media or you. I hope you guys didn't feel like I didn't like you guys because I had a great relationship with every one of you. It was. I hope that we can build something in Carolina where they've already built that. They got the fans, they got the city, rallying around the Canes, and I don't think it's quiet. Obviously, Canada is a completely different story in the sense of the media and all of that, but it wasn't a specific thing I was looking for. You play hockey for the city. I love playing hockey, but you want the fans to be excited about your team. You want the fans to, stand outside the rink like they did in Winnipeg and watch the playoff games and go nuts. That's what gives you the extra energy. And I believe that they've built something similar to that in Carolina. So I'm excited to feel that.
Nikolaj Ehlers is excited for Carolina, but was there anything the Jets could have done differently to keep him, or was this something that was inevitable from his perspective? And here's Nikolaj Ehlers on that.
Like I told them, they didn't do anything wrong. I was there for 10 years. I loved it there. I love the organization, the people in it, the guys. They became family, right? And the city of Winnipeg, the fans. Everyone that's played in Winnipeg knows how incredible it is to play there. For me, it was more about trying something new and challenging myself, getting out and, see different things, different culture. And that's what that's what I wanted to do. Obviously, like I said, love playing in Winnipeg. Will never forget my time, but it was time for me personally to get out and experience something different and challenge myself on and off the ice.
There's Nikolaj Ehlers, now member of the Carolina Hurricanes, will be wearing the familiar to Jets fans 27. Maybe we'll play some more clips from Ehlers later on in the show. I can see people are getting angry in the chat at me for playing these, ready to move on to the next chapter. Well, the next chapter was rolled out on the red carpet on Friday at Canada Life Center for Jonathan Toews, hosting a welcome press conference. You had Kevin Cheveldayoff, Scott Arniel, introducing Jonathan Toews with the jersey. He had his mom there, which he gave a shout out to in the press conference. Family and friends, some fans invited, along with a lot of Winnipeg media, where he put the Jets jersey on for the first time. And he was asked after the press conference, if it felt weird for him putting on another jersey.
I mean, for a while I would have said yes, but at this point I would say absolutely not. I think, listen, I'm so thankful, speaking of when I got drafted, and you look back at how much of a random thing that is as a young player, and how much, the team that you're going to, the city you're going to, like the group and everything about it, and the trajectory of it all, how much that impacts your career. You can't underestimate that. So I think I've been so fortunate, so blessed to have had those years. And, I laugh about it now with some of the guys that we spent a lot of years together. And, there's a moment there where, year in, year out, it's almost Groundhog's Day, where it's all the same guys, the same coaching staff, and things are just rolling, and it's kind of the expectation. And you think it's always going to be that way until it's not, right? So that being said, I think got to bump into Kaner last week and have a chat with him, and I think even seeing him go play for the Rangers, then the Red Wings right after, was kind of when that reality set in that, hey, some things change and it's for the best. And I think the organization, that whole era, I would say, was coming to an end, and we were all very thankful to be a part of that, to have had each other as teammates and had the success we had. So things change, and it's for the best sometimes. So I think that's where the direction they're going, and it's good for me too. So.
There's Jonathan Toews from Friday's press conference, but at age 37, a lot of questions about number 19. He hasn't played in a couple seasons, and it seems like the Jets are going to eventually be counting on him to contribute. Could he be second-line center and helping replace some of the offense lost when Ehlers were gone? And as far as those question marks, Jonathan Toews was asked, what does he think he's going to be capable of this season?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and talk about goals and assists and all that. I think ultimately, I've just tried my best to be very honest and realistic with myself as far as what the challenges are. I think a couple of years ago I missed the shortened season before I went back to Chicago. In a way, since I've hit the ice and really been skating a lot these last months, or a couple months or so, it didn't feel like that much time had gone by. I know it's a long time on paper if you're playing hockey. A lot of things change in the league, and teams are different, the game's different, and all that. But for myself, it just kind of all went by in the blink of an eye, and so at this point, I'm just trying to be really realistic about what the challenges are, and try and meet those and prepare myself, knowing that you can be in really good shape and work your tail off all summer, but you kind of forget the grind in the NHL season until you're 15, 20 games in, and it's just nonstop. And knowing this year is an Olympic year too, and the schedule will probably be pretty condensed on either side. There's a lot of little things like that, but you do the best you can to get out on the ice in the gym with good players and guys of high caliber, and just keep working on your game day in, day out. So that aspect doesn't change.
There's Jonathan Toews. He will be wearing number 19, and previously worn by David Gustafsson for the Winnipeg Jets. He was asked about those conversations in securing the jersey number.
It won't be much of a negotiation. He can just name it, So that was a tough phone call. I think Mark and the training staff had already talked to him, and so hopefully they warmed him up for me a little bit. It wasn't a situation where I felt very comfortable asking that, because I think he was At least made it seem he was happy and honored to give up the number. So yeah, it's something I definitely don't take lightly. I hear nothing but good things about him and how he is as a player, but especially a teammate. So yeah, like I said, it won't be a negotiation, so we'll talk about it soon enough, I'm sure.
And for Jonathan Toews, we had heard throughout the insider rumors, there were a number of teams involved in trying to sign him. Could he go Winnipeg, Colorado? Was Toronto a team that was interested? And he discussed the decision process which led him to landing on Winnipeg.
I had a handful of teams that in cities that I thought about, and as I got closer and had a few more conversations with Pat, a few conversations with Mark Chipman as well, which were very helpful. I got to give him credit. He was checking in once in a while. Like it's been quite some time now, and I think that was a huge part of really starting to clue in on like what the reality of playing here would be like, or anywhere else for that matter. But it really got to a point where I couldn't see myself wearing any other jersey, and it's just on so many levels. Like it just wasn't something you write down the pros and cons on a piece of paper. To me, it wasn't rational at all. It was just more of a intuitive thing where it just felt right, and you can go over the million reasons why. But I didn't really have to call my mom or dad or my brother or anyone really. I just kind of knew in my heart that this is what I wanted to do. So it felt good every step of the way. I'm really excited to be a part of it all.
I knew in my heart this is what I wanted to do. Jonathan Toews on joining the Winnipeg Jets, and seems very excited, seems rejuvenated. He talked about having that feeling of getting drafted when putting on the Jets jersey. He spent a couple years off, and you hope that it's allowed his body to heal. And I'm sure he's putting in the work this offseason to make sure he's ready for training camp, for game one of the season. And he talked about being ready, from game to game. I think there's certainly some unknowns, but a lot of excitement about a guy who's from Winnipeg, has had such a legendary career, choosing to sign here. I think that's going to be very exciting, for his first game, whether preseason, regular season, first goal. I'm looking forward to following that throughout the year. And one other Jets note from the weekend, arbitration. Gabriel Vilardi, Dylan Samberg, and Morgan Barron all filed for arbitration. No need to panic. It just sets a deadline for negotiations. There's no hearings scheduled right now. So we're going to keep an eye on this going forward. Hopefully they're able to come to terms. If you want to know projected deals from AFP Analytics, Gabriel Vilardi, 4 years at 6.8 million AAV. Samberg, 5 years at 5.2 million AAV, and Morgan Barron, they're projecting 2 years at 1.5 million AAV. So that is just a guideline of what one analytics company that's online, that Daily Faceoff uses, is projecting. So we also have Connor's UFA, RFA preview on our channel. I would recommend checking that out as well, where he has some of those numbers, although maybe the Ehlers portion a bit expired. And Hayden Fleury, I think, is mentioned on there too. He did re-sign. They call the CFL the Crazy Football League for a reason. What a weekend it was. We had the Stampede Bowl on Thursday with the Bombers losing. And how about Friday's game? 89 combined points with 89 combined points between Hamilton and Toronto, including two, not one, but two kickoff return touchdowns, which won someone from Westminster, BC, $1 million with the Save On contest. That's Roy Leicester. Saturday, Nathan Rourke's last-second comeback against Montreal, then a post-game fight. And we also had Edmonton's first win of the year at home against Ottawa, with Trey Ford playing mistake-free football. I'm so pumped to be joined by Darren Bauming coming up for some CFL and Jets discussion. But first, here's Huss.
Let me thank our friends at Rolly's Transfer for their support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Folks, if you have a move coming up, lean on the most trusted name in moving in Manitoba. For over 60 years, family owned and operated here in the Peg is Rolly's Transfer. You can check out Rollies.com for their website. You can request an estimate. Use the promo code WST for a special discount on moving services and moving supplies. And of course, the friendly staff at Rollies will turn it around quickly with the great quote and get you locked in for the white glove treatment and service that Rollies has been famous for now into their 7th decade. For all of your moving needs, make it Rollies. Check them out online and request an estimate today over at Rollies.com. I know there's going to be lots of smiles down at Canada Life Centre today when Jonathan Toews is introduced. Speaking of smiles, if it's been a minute since you've been into the dentist, why don't you pop down and see our pal Dr. Terry and his great staff at St. Vital Dental Center at 167 St. Anne's. Got a beautiful new facility, state-of-the-art equipment, very convenient location with even more convenient free parking right in the back of the building, and a full service array of dental services, everything from cleanings and checkups to things like dental implants. You can find out more on everything St. Vital Dental Center has, taking clients and patients from 6 months to 99 plus. Find out more and make a booking at stvitaldental.ca and tell Dr. Terry that the boys at Winnipeg Sports Talk sent you. Big summer weekend coming up. Heat warnings in effect. It's going to be steamy. You're going to want to stay hydrated, and that might mean a trip to your local Manitoba liquor marts. Of course, we just celebrated Canada Day. What's more Canadian than Canada's original Canadian Whiskey Canadian Club? And now, for these summer weekends, make sure you grab a Canadian Club pack, which is a 12-pack with 4 CC Ginger Ale, 4 Citrus Smash, and 4 of the new half and halves, all with Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey. That is available now as well at your local Manitoba liquor marts. And hey, as we get out onto the water this weekend, many of you will be going out camping. You got to make sure you cover your bases when it comes to batteries. And nobody takes care of Winnipeggers and Manitobans when it comes to batteries like Donnie and the gang at Manitoba Battery, your local leader with the largest selection of batteries in town, all at the best prices. It is time to wake up. If you've been spending your money and time at the big box stores, what are you doing? Save up to $60 a battery for things like boat and camper batteries while shopping local at Manitoba Battery. You can see them in store, Logan Avenue, or their new location on Dovercourt Drive in the south end of the city. Give them a call or order online, and Manitoba Battery will deliver those batteries to you for free anywhere inside the city of Winnipeg. It's just that easy. Order online today. ManitobaBattery.com.
There's Huss. He's away, gone fishing. He'll be back next week. But I'm so pumped to be joined right now. Darren Bauming, Bonfire Sports here on YouTube. He's got the pre-game with Walby, post-game with Schnitzy. Darren, what's going on? How was your weekend?
Yeah, it was a weekend of decompression, right? There was a lot of angst amongst Winnipeg sports fans last week. So, yeah, it was good to kind of kick back and recharge a little bit this weekend.
Stampede Bowl, making history there, and Nikolaj Ehlers signing with Carolina, leaving the Winnipeg Jets on Thursday. 2 stomach punches for Winnipeg sports fans, but you did actually manage to catch up with Gus Nyquist, the Winnipeg Jets signed in free agency. What did you learn when you spoke to him over the weekend?
Yeah, people head to my Twitter. You can find a link to the story on NHL.com that we whipped together. Yeah, you know what? Gustav Nyquist called me right at kickoff of the Bombers Stampeders game, the first annual Stampede Bowl. So I actually missed that first opening drive, but was able to catch up during the commercial breaks and cut all those highlight clips and get them ready on the post-game show. But really impressive guy to talk to. You know, for Jets fans that aren't familiar with Gustav Nyquist, played well over 850 games in the NHL, over 500 points. I was really interested to learn he once led the NCAA in scoring. He's a Swede, of course, and amongst just a couple now on the Winnipeg Jets. But to be a Hobey Baker finalist and to lead the NCAA in scoring as a Swede, I found that really interesting. But then in talking with him, the guy's an absolute pro, right? You can tell that he's a veteran. You can tell that is far from his first rodeo, but he's really excited about joining a Winnipeg Jets team that, is a competitive team every single year. And for somebody that's been in the league a long time like he has, he's never had a chance to hoist a Stanley Cup. That's why he signed with the Winnipeg Jets, $3.25 million for a couple years. And, I know a lot of fans, is like I suggested on Twitter that, this is a guy that could be in Winnipeg's top 6. And a lot of fans didn't like that. They're like, oh, they're going to be in trouble. He's no Nikolaj Ehlers. No, he's no Nikolaj Ehlers. But he's 1 year removed from a 75-point season where he had over 50 assists. He scored 20 goals or close to 20 goals through the majority of his NHL career. And in my story on NHL.com, Kevin Cheveldayoff mentioned that, it was a bit of an anomaly, a bit of a funny thing. I think the word Cheveldayoff used was funny, how he was used last year. Not that it's funny how he was used, but it's a funny thing that, he's a big offensive producer, capable of that, but wasn't used in that way with the Nashville Predators. Nyquist also talked about Luke Schenn, and it seems like Luke Schenn has done a lot of lobbying, a lot of recruitment for the Winnipeg Jets. Was a teammate with him a little bit last year. They both kind of got traded through Nashville, Minnesota, obviously Schenn with Pittsburgh, but talked about the culture. And one of the things that was really important to Nyquist was how the organization treats their players. And we're starting to hear that from pretty much everybody who either comes to Winnipeg or has spent time here, in the National Hockey League, that this organization treats their players right, and the culture and just the day-to-day of being a Winnipeg Jet is a very appealing thing. So, it may not be immediate, but I think eventually through time, all of those player polls that kind of crap on the city of Winnipeg, it's always kind of bothered me a little bit. I think we're a bit of an underdog, and a lot of Winnipeggers kind of have that woe is me mentality or that cynical mentality. I think this is an outstanding city, and I think NHL players that come here, see how the organization is run, be a successful team, and be in that playoff conversation and be a potential Stanley Cup winning contender every single year, will eventually change some of those player polls. So Nyquist is really excited to come to Winnipeg. And, I'm kind of thinking a guy with 50 assists, if you can put him on that second line, if it's with Jonathan Toews prior to Adam Lowry coming back, or if it's with Cole Perfetti or maybe Brad Lambert or, a couple of those new guys with a veteran like Nyquist that can be a playmaker, very smart, capable offensive producer and responsible two ways, very responsible two ways. It could be an interesting dynamic in that middle six for the Jets.
Had a 70-point season a couple years ago. Seems like a decent option to me. I'm looking forward to how he fits into the Jets lineup. We talk so much about Jonathan Toews rocking number 19. We don't have a number for Gus Nyquist on the Jets website just yet. He's won 14, 28, and 41 in his career. I don't think the Jets have a 14 right now. They do not. So I would imagine we'll be seeing him in the number 14 jersey. But we'll be touching more on the hockey with Mike McIntyre coming up. But the Bombers on the bye week. And what do you think of this last game, losing in the Stampede Bowl? Do we be reaching for the panic button, or is this a one-off performance?
No, I don't think there's any reason to reach for the panic button. This is what I talked about on the postgame show on Bonfire Sports. Remo, all-time, Mike O'Shea versus the Calgary Stampeders, 13-13. These teams always play each other neck and neck. Last year, another successful year for the Blue Bombers. Yeah, it was an 0-4 start, but the Stampeders came into Winnipeg and beat the Bombers. They don't lose at home very often. So bad day at the office. The defense struggled. The offense, I would say, struggled overall, but more so it's kind of that, hyper focus, rightfully so, on quarterback Zach Collaros. You throw 2 interceptions, you lose the turnover battle, you're going to lose most games in pro football. But when they are big, long return pick sixes, immediate points on the board, momentum, and to go from deep inside Stampeders territory after long drives, it's absolutely morally deflating for the offense and for the team. So that's probably the main storyline and takeaway from that game is that Zach Collaros, made 2 mistakes that really painted the picture. But beyond that, he threw for almost 300 yards. He was 70% passing. And the offense, when you look at the drive charts, they put together long, consistent drives. They were moving the chains. If they took away Keurig Wheatfall and Nick Dembski and some of those guys, well, they didn't take away Nick Dembski. He had 9 catches on 10 targets for 74 yards. But they took away, Dalton Schoen, and they took away Keurig Wheatfall. Schoen had a forgettable game, or memorable for Bombers fans in the wrong way, but forgettable for him with a couple, one bad drop and another just kind of beyond his outstretched hands. But Kevin Sklercius was the one that stepped up when the Stampeders' vaunted secondary really took away those big marquee names in Winnipeg's offensive attack. So Sklercius, 10 catches on 11 targets, 78 yards. That's nice. But it was the 4 second down conversions. He was a big reason why Winnipeg put together those long drives, moved the chains. On the surface, I understand Bombers fans completely disgusted with that performance overall. No doubt Mike O'Shea and the whole coaching staff disgusted that night and the next day when they're breaking down the film. But as Zach Collaros says, snap and clear, you flush it and move on. Winnipeg will definitely do that. The bye week, always tough when you go into that with a devastating loss like that. But at 3-1, the Stampeders are 3-1. They're 1 game back of, they're still chasing the, 1 game back of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who Calgary plays this week. This West Division is still wide open, and Winnipeg getting a chance against Calgary this coming or next week in Winnipeg following their bye. 90s night. Good night for redemption.
Just to clarify, I said no one on the Jets has 14. I was only sorting by forwards. I thought I was sorting by the entire roster. Ville Heinola, of course. Right. How could I forget?
Well, they've got 9 defensemen under contract, right? Yeah. Ville Heinola, one of them. So Winnipeg's going to have to make a decision with some of that. So, Remo, you and I are similar. We always kind of, look at the aesthetics of the game, the numbers, all those sorts of things. Be interesting to see what Nyquist wears. Be interesting to see if Heinola is in the picture. I wonder if he's on the outside looking in.
I am curious what happens with the defense, but I don't want to flip-flop back and forth. Sticking with the Bombers, 3-1 at their second bye of the season. I don't know who these schedule makers are, but I think you have to be. I mean, this is a lot better than they were at this point last season. I think you have to be happy with the way that they've played here in the first 4 games.
Yeah, 3-1 versus an 0-4 start last year. They made their way to the Grey Cup. It's a marathon of a season. Everybody says that. But to have 2 bye weeks down already is really tough. They had a bye week 1. They have a bye this week, week 6. And now they'll go 11 straight weeks, 11 straight games without another break. They'll have, I think it's probably good that they'll get that bye much, much later in the year when they'll need it. But, no doubt they're going to be fighting for the West Division title because if you can get a home game in the playoffs and that bye, it'll help when you've already got 2 down and we're barely, into the month of July. So a West Division title would be paramount for the Blue Bombers because you think about it, that means the bye, as I mentioned, and then 2 home games. Potentially, if you win the West Final, and then, of course, the 112th Grey Cup at Princess Auto Stadium here in the Peg.
This year, making it to 5 Grey Cups, losing the last 3, plus the Stampede Bowl now. And, this season they kind of remade the roster. What are your impressions of some of the new additions that we've seen? We did see Kenny Lawler with a huge game this weekend. Yeah. Janarian Grant still stings, I think, him leaving, but we've seen Vaval be pretty solid back there. So what's, at the the second bye of the season now. What's your impression of some of the newcomers on the roster?
Yeah, the motocross monster Trey Vavel. He's kind of still working through some rookie kinks in his game. Some bobbles, some bad decisions. Had a bad one, in Calgary this past week. Deciding to take it out of the end zone and ended up getting tackled on, I think, the 6-yard line or something like that. That will come in time. I'm not one that likes to look at who they lost and, what could have been. The reality is Carrick Wheatfall has been a 100-yard producer pretty consistently. Dalton Schoen, a lot of people have talked about his ongoing health versus Lawler. They've both been guys that have missed significant chunks of time. For my dollar, I'm not just saying this because he's on Winnipeg right now, I would take Dalton Schoen over a Kenny Lawler. That chemistry with Zach Collaros, that possession facet to his game, as well as the big play to be able to open things up over the top. I kind of like that. Lawler's hands are insane. What did he have? 200 yards and 3 touchdowns as Bo Levi threw 5 in a huge Hamilton Tiger Cats win over the lowly defending Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. But for Winnipeg, I said this prior to training camp, Remo, I like this roster. I think this roster in 2025 is deeper and arguably more talented than it was last year. I know Bombers fans focus on those guys that are no longer here, but the reality is when you have Michael Griffin, when you have Jamal Parker, when you have Jareth Stearns, when you have Tony Jones and Jonathan Jones waiting on the practice roster, and the way Retta Cramdy's playing, you add in a veteran in James Vaughters to bookend Willie Jefferson on that D-line, a healthy Cameron Lawson at defensive tackle. I like Winnipeg's roster this year better than last year. I think a lot of fans need to understand that football is an evolving game. Roster turnover is inevitable and often heavy. Winnipeg's 3-0 start and now 3-1, I think should bode well for fans that are maybe unsure how they're going to fare this year with so much change in the roster. I think they're in excellent shape. And Collaros, 1 game removed from being a CFL top performer, having a forgettable one in the Stampede Bowl, but a bye week might serve them well to straighten things out between the ears.
Yeah, and one thing that we haven't seen from the Bombers is there's so many injuries. I talked with Derek Taylor before the season. He noted how just they were injured the whole year, how many games they lost. We had Oliveira injured the first couple, looked solid in his return on Thursday, carrying 13 times for 61 yards, catching 6 for 51 as well. But Dalton Schoen left with an injury. I guess we'll have to hold our breath and wait and see. We probably won't know anything until they return to practice next week.
Yeah, that's true. I think it was a very, very positive sign that Schoen left the field on his own power, and was also, the broadcast showed him on the sidelines later in the game, kind of walking around and I won't say no worse for wear, but appeared to be okay. So at that point, precautionary, likely to, keep him out at that point. But it's the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. We're never going to know about injuries until they actually get to the practice field and put out an injury report, but they need Dalton Schoen. They need him healthy, and no doubt Bombers fans are going to be hoping that he's good to go for the Stampeders rematch in Winnipeg.
Yeah, and one change for the Bombers that we talked about was Jason Hogan in at OC as Buck Pierce off to BC after 4 games. What have you noticed from OC Jason Hogan? Because this was a big unknown, and I know how the game plan would change for this year.
Yeah, he's creative. I've seen a little bit of that Paul Apolice, Buck Pierce influence in his game, like the offense that he's created and some of the play calls. I've also seen a little bit of what we saw in Zach Collaros with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. It seems like Jason Hogan has done his homework and done his research, and that's maybe an understatement. I think he has looked at the roster, the guys that he has, what they do best, whether it's been in Winnipeg or elsewhere, and kind of blended all of that into one. But one thing I know that a lot of fans don't see all the time is how deep they go into a playbook early in the season. when you face the same opponent twice in a row, like Winnipeg did with BC in their first 2 games, like they're going to do now with a bye in the middle against the Calgary Stampeders, you might see them implement some different things, what worked in the first game, what didn't. And then as the season evolves and you get into that second half of the season, and being a marathon of a season, you don't show all of your cards early. So I expect, like from most teams, or most, I'm going to say almost all teams in the CFL, as the months go by and we get into September and October, that's when you'll start seeing different things come out of the playbook, as well as adjustments to the current concepts that they're running. But I've been very impressed with Jason Hogan. The run game, the pass game, the blend of those two things. And it seems like he has no problem at all abandoning the run and going pass when it's working. And other times, suddenly he can just flip a switch and Winnipeg will go bully ball, offensive line, pushing forward, and they just run to kill the clock and then hang on to a lead like they did against the Edmonton Elks in Winnipeg a couple weeks ago. I've been very impressed with Jason Hogan as OC.
Yeah, Jason Hogan's been looking pretty good so far with the headset on. And you mentioned the bye this week. They do have another bye, week 18, and this schedule, you had back-to-back against BC, back-to-back against Calgary with the bye in between, and then back-to-back against Toronto later on in the season, plus, the one that's with Saskatchewan every year, Labor Day, and the Banjo Bowl back-to-back. But looking around the league, it seems like the Bombers on a collision course here with those 2 games against the Riders that could, determine the West. I don't say determine the West halfway through, but would be certainly a big factor, as the Riders are on top as well at 4-0.
Yeah, I mean, those games are important, whether they're in June, July, or they're in September and October. The reality is Winnipeg plays Saskatchewan 3 times during the regular season, so it's going to go beyond Labor Day and the Banjo Bowl and just the points for and against in those 2 matchups. You can't count anybody out in the CFL, especially in July. I mean, Edmonton getting their first win, I don't think they're going to be part of that conversation, but BC with a healthy Nathan Rourke, he was injured early, new head coach with Buck Pierce. They could figure things out and definitely have the talent in that organization to be in that conversation in the West. But right now it does look like a 3-dog race, being Calgary, Winnipeg, and Saskatchewan. So of course those head-to-head matchups are going to be so important. The Calgary Stampeders were coming off a bye following their first loss of the season when they kicked off in the Stampede Bowl against Winnipeg. Huge win. Well, now Winnipeg, coming off their first loss of the season, get a bye week to prepare, and then they'll get the Calgary Stampeders. So, the advantage kind of shifts to the Blue Bombers in that rematch. But Dave Dickinson versus Mike O'Shea. Dickinson was the guy that said, the effing Canadian Mafia, caught lip reading on the TSN broadcast a few years ago. That will go down in CFL lore and legend. These 2 teams don't like each other very much. A lot of respect for one another. 13-13 all time with Mike O'Shea coaching the Blue Bombers. We'll see if Winnipeg can shift the ledger back to their favor, in about a week and a half.
Yeah, big game on the 18th, Princess Ottawa Stadium. I don't think I've seen it sell out, but very close. Yep. 90s night as well. It used to be 80s night when I was, like 20 years ago. Now it's now 90s night is the big thing. But we just had a pretty wild weekend in the CFL. Darren, you had that game Friday night with all the points. Hamilton, Toronto, last minute comeback by Nathan Rourke, and Edmonton getting in the win column for the first time yesterday. What stood out to you from the 3 games this past weekend as we wrap up this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, the Edmonton Elks, it's nice to see them win a home game in July. I don't think they've done that in 2 years, I think someone pointed out. But good for Mark Killam as a guy that started in the CFL as a strength and conditioning coach, now being a head coach, putting in the work, growing his game has been very impressive to see. Edmonton's defense, frankly, stinks. They are awful, but they can potentially get better. They spent a lot in free agency. Their defensive coordinator, J.C. Sherritt, it's his first year as a coordinator in pro ball. If they can figure that out, I think they'll be in a lot better shape to maybe make a playoff push, maybe a crossover, something like that. But that game stood out to me because I really thought Ottawa was going to go in there exert some authority, but they're kind of wishy-washy. You never really know what you're going to get with the Ottawa Red Blacks. I know when I'm maybe putting down $1 or two or a unit or two, watching those, over-under lines and that sort of thing, I'm always wary of putting it on a game that involves the Ottawa Red Blacks. You just never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, I was expecting a lot of points in that one. It seems like everyone's just passing all over Edmonton this year. Will they be able to outscore that poor defense? Darren, you're doing a great job on Bonfire pregame and postgame as well. Bonfire Sports YouTube channel. I will throw the link into the description. Darren, thanks again for coming on, taking the time. Also, great job at NHL.com. You were there at the Toews press conference, talking to Gus Nyquist, development camp, all the stuff, Darren. Busy guy. So thank you for taking the time to join me today.
Wouldn't have it any other way, Remo. Good to be with you, man. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. There he is, Darren Bauming. He's on Twitter, or now known as X. Darren Bauming. We're going to go deep into Jets topics. Mike McIntyre had a busy one last week. Free agency, development camp, Jonathan Toews introductory press conference, and the topic that apparently I've beaten to death and no one in the chat wants to hear from, Nikolaj Ehlers, the goodbye press conference. We'll touch on all that next up with Mike McIntyre. But first, here's Hustler.
July 18th will be the next time we're back at Princess Auto Stadium, and I imagine that'll be a team in a very ornery mood after what happened last night. Of course, Princess Auto, proud sponsors of the Bombers and Winnipeg Sports Talk. Princess Auto is the place where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Pop by and see them, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, or out in Brandon. And of course, you can shop online 24/7, 365 over at princessauto.com. I am going to be off the show next week because I'm going to be with Mark, our winner from the Health Sciences Center Foundation lottery auction out at Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge. And I'll certainly be firing out some pictures, hopefully of some big fish and some great times from Aikens. But this is a great time. If you're thinking about maybe getting a world-class flying fishing experience coming up this summer, there's a little bit of extra room this year because less Americans coming over the border. So, folks, if you're thinking about a July, later on in August or September booking, WST listeners 10% off right now. Go over to aikenslake.com. You can find out all the information on options and availability for the 2025 fishing season. And when you call and talk to Pitt or Julie, make sure you said you heard it on Winnipeg Sports Talk. I want to take advantage of an even better deal, 10% off right now to WST listeners, aikenslake.com. I promise to come back with some great pictures and some good stories when I'm back after the trip next week. And hey, do want to thank our friends at F Apparel for their support of WST. Guys, the summer's here, wedding season, right in the middle of it. If you need to up your menswear game, there's only one place to go, and that's F Apparel. Custom suits starting at just over $400. Chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. Pop by and see them, 190 Smith Street downtown. And by the way, if you are in a wedding party or getting married yourself, make sure to talk to the guys at F about a special discount for wedding parties when you get your suits for the big day at F Apparel. Find out more online or book an appointment at F, that's EPH apparel.com.
There's us. He's fishing. He'll be back next week. I'm holding it down and so pumped to be joined by Mike McIntyre, Winnipeg Free Press. Mike, thanks for hopping in. Pretty busy week last week for the Jets between free agency, development camp, and players signing and leaving.
Not exactly the dog days of summer for the hockey club, that's for sure. We're going to hit a stretch now where things are going to go quiet for a while, but last week was not quiet at all. Lots going on with the team. Of course, I mean, we knew development camp would be happening, and that's always a chance to see the prospect pool on display, including some of the shiniest new toys that they just picked at the draft. So that was a lot of fun. But you also had the drama and the intrigue and the pomp and circumstance of the Jonathan Toews introduction. Not that he needed an introduction around here. He's obviously well known, but that was quite a glitzy event that they put on late last week for him. And then, Nikolaj Ehlers, of course, all that drama playing out. I think Jets fans were resigned to the fact that he probably wasn't coming back. And then, a very interesting chat with him. I jumped on the Zoom call on Saturday morning. Nikolaj Ehlers, he took his time to speak, just as he took his time to make his decision, but he certainly had some interesting things to say. I asked him a bunch of questions about his time in Winnipeg, and been interesting to see some of the fallout, Remo. Like, I get the sense there's some people that, they want to wash their hands of him. He's dead to them now, basically, that he's not a member of the Jets. And people the fact that he had so many nice things to say about Winnipeg, the city, the fans, the organization, almost seems to be rubbing people the wrong way, which I don't totally understand. Would people be happier if he went down kind of guns a-blazing and burned all the bridges? Like, I don't know, maybe there's people that want to be mad at Nikolaj Ehlers for moving on from the Jets and are having a hard or getting more angry that he's such a nice guy. And I don't know, it's all very bizarre, but it certainly makes for some good topics of conversation, some water cooler chatter, that's for sure.
Hey, I'm here for the Nikolaj Ehlers conversation. I think it's important to reflect, and he spent 10 great years here, and maybe understand why he decided to move on, because he's one of the few players that has left the Jets as a free agent. Most of the players do end up re-signing or they come to a trade. We saw Andrew Ladd get traded, but a lot of them, have re-signed. Hellebuck, Scheifele. But we will have this conversation throughout the offseason and maybe go into next year with Kyle Connor. But I wanted to stick with Friday. Were you surprised by how big this press conference and how big of a deal it seems like because they're making such a big announcement here? I would think seems like they think Jonathan Toews can play a big role on this team, having not played for a couple of years.
Well, for folks who thought, he was being signed to be just a complimentary depth piece in the bottom six of the lineup, safe to say the, Jets social folks wouldn't be posting slow motion walking off the airplane in his hometown, which I thought was hilarious. That was the funniest part about it. He's from Winnipeg, and we show him arriving in Winnipeg. Like, I get that he wasn't in town, which is why the news conference wasn't done, say, on July 1st when his signing was official. But the private plane entrance and the walk down the tarmac with Mark Chipman, and you don't have like Cole Koepke and Gustav Nyquist and Tanner Pearson did not have news conferences last week with the premier of Manitoba and the mayor of Winnipeg in attendance. But Jonathan Toews did, and they pulled out all the stops. What's interesting, Remo, is like clearly Jonathan Toews is embracing the spotlight and the pressure. And that's an interesting element to this story, right? Because only he knows, I guess, what he thinks he's capable of. And I think we've beaten this topic to death here, but he's a very proud athlete. I don't believe Jonathan Toews is coming back just for some kind of ceremonial victory lap. He's coming back believing that he can be a contributor to a Stanley Cup contender. But by doing it in his hometown, by having such a splash made of his signing, as has been done here, it's only increasing the spotlight on him. And, when you think about the fact there were other teams that were pursuing him, I guess credit to Jonathan Toews for not shying away from that limelight, right? Like, I'm sure if he had signed in Tampa Bay or Colorado, those were some of the teams that were rumored to be interested in Toews, and there were others. I'm sure it would have been a big deal, but it would not have been anything like this. I don't think the mayor of Tampa Bay and the state governor would have been in attendance at a news conference there. And so, like, he could have gone somewhere quieter where there wasn't going to be all of this focus on him. And, he's jumped in with both feet, and he's not dumb. Like, he had to have known that this was going to be the case, that this was a major story. And, even I'm sure the news conference, like, if he had wanted something a little smaller, I'm sure they would have obliged. But yeah, I mean, it's just one thing for sure, Remo, they're probably selling a lot of Hayes jerseys, Jets jerseys. We'll wait and see what the on ice result is, but I got to think off the ice, this is already a winning decision for the organization in a big way.
Yeah, you can see the excitement from Chad, and this is something that we've been talking about the possibility of on this show going back, I think, 2 years.
Yeah.
I did a video, I don't know if it was you and Hustler, saying, could Jonathan Toews come back to the Winnipeg Jets? And it did really, really strong numbers here on YouTube. And I mean, you saw the views on our show too, sorry.
I thought it was interesting, and my teammate Ken Wiebe kind of delved into this topic in his story that he wrote on Friday. He had a really nice one-on-one chat with Mark Chipman, and it was interesting to hear at the news conference. It was revealed that, like you mentioned 2 years ago, Remo, well, it turns out, like, Kevin Cheveldayoff and Mark Chipman, they were dreaming about this like 14 years ago. And, Kevin Cheveldayoff kind of led us into a conversation that he had with Mark Chipman, like, shortly after the NHL had returned to Winnipeg. And obviously Cheveldayoff was brought in as the GM. And, interesting that this is something that came up that long ago, and sort of a full circle moment, right? As Kevin Cheveldayoff mentioned, the text message that he sent to Mark Chipman a couple of weeks ago when it was officially made official, and Mark talked with Ken Wiebe about that, and kind of a really nice personal story, I guess, behind the signing. So, yeah, I mean, why not, right? I mean, you look back to when the Jets first returned, and then think about it. Who is the franchise that all the talk, in 2011 when the Jets came back, that they wanted to try and emulate? Well, that was the Blackhawks, because of what they'd done and what they'd go on to continue to do. And the Blackhawks, of course, were led by a Winnipegger. So, it kind of made sense that the owner of the Winnipeg team would kind of wonder, could one day, and I'm sure nobody imagined it happening the way it did, with, Toews taking a 2-year hiatus from hockey. Really, it looked like his career was over. I'll say this, he does seem to have the right attitude. Like, I know there's people that are maybe worried that the Jets are overvaluing what they feel Toews can do. And I think that will all work itself out in due time. Like, if Jonathan Toews can't handle 20 minutes a night and a top 6 role, I imagine Scott Arniel, who's in the business of trying to win hockey games, would react accordingly. But I mean, time will tell. That being said, the fact that, Scott Arniel shared that Jonathan Toews said to him, I'll do whatever you want. Like, I'll play on the fourth line. The Jets aren't paying him, at least potentially paying him, depending on the games played, as a fourth liner. And obviously the bells and whistles, the sizzle around him is not befitting a fourth liner. But again, let's not forget, Jonathan Toews is a legitimate superstar in the league. Now, he may not be a superstar anymore. It doesn't change anything that he's accomplished on the ice. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. he is arguably the greatest hockey player this city, this province has produced. So, for people maybe upset or puzzled about all the noise surrounding him, it's about his history, his legacy, and the fact that, he's now going to play for the hometown team. But yeah, that's the right attitude, right? Like, not put me on the top power play unit and I better have the best line mates and get all the opportunities. Like, hey, I'll start from the bottom if I have to and hopefully prove that I'm capable of more. That's what you want to see. And same with the leadership issues. Like, some people asked the other day, and I was curious as well, is there going to be anything awkward about having, arguably one of the greatest captains in modern NHL history, Captain Sirius, in the room with the existing leadership group? And, this is not going to be like a Blake Wheeler scenario where I think that was awkward for everyone. Guys were probably tiptoeing around on eggshells, because Wheeler had been stripped of the captaincy, yet he's still there. It would appear from what everybody's saying, and certainly the leadership group was consulted on this, and they've all chatted with Jonathan. He's viewed as a guy that will only enhance what they already have going on, as opposed to, maybe working against it. And if you're the Jets, I think that's a very good thing.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this plays out. We've talked about off ice, a win for the Jets, but it seems like there's so much unknown here when it comes to on ice. Maybe is it too much unknown for a team that's coming off a President's Trophy win and a second round exit from the playoffs, and they would like to get further this season?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I don't think it's unfair to maybe suggest that overall, again, we'll see how it plays out, but there's certainly some cause for concern about the state of the lineup heading into next season. That being said, I think it's worth noting a couple things. This may not be a finished product as we sit here on July 7th. The Jets still have almost $20 million in cap space. Now, granted, a good chunk of that is going to be taken up by Gabe Vilardi, Dylan Sandberg, Morgan Barron. One development the other day, actually over the weekend, Remo, that's worth noting is that all three of those players elected for salary arbitration. And I'm in the position that says that's actually a good thing for the Jets. Like, that means none of those guys are going to carry over into camp. There will not be any, I know they often get called holdouts, but when you don't have a contract, the player's not technically holding out. They don't have a contract. They can't come to camp. But so this will not be like the Jacob Trouba situation where it's a distraction and you're wondering if when's the player going to join. No, they're all going to have contract certainty like by the end of July or early August, depending on when ARB dates get set. And that's if they even get to arbitration. I personally would expect deals to get worked out with all three. I'd be surprised if they even get to arbitration. But if they do, you'll get a ruling and it'll be binding. So for the Jets, they will know exactly how much cap space they have in a matter of weeks here with all their players now under contract. Whether they try and weaponize that now in the form of a trade, and we know there are teams that after the Nikolaj Ehlers situation are probably going to be looking to shake up their rosters with trades. Could the Jets get in on that? I think they absolutely could. And if they don't weaponize it now, put me on the record as saying I don't expect the Jets would make the same mistake as they did last trade deadline, which is leaving a bunch of money on the table unspent in a year where they're in a win now mentality. That is to say that the Jets could always use that cap space, which is a weapon, to alleviate any holes in their roster as we get closer to the trade deadline next season. And I think if we learned anything, Remo, about this past NHL season, it's this. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. Just look at the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers, who both finished third in their division, quite a ways back in their conference, but they turned it on at the most important time of the year. They both got back to the Stanley Cup. and the Panthers won. Now, that's not to say the Jets should just go through next season on cruise control, but the idea that they have to be the best regular season team as they were last year, I think we've seen that that's not necessarily the case. And so I look at their roster today. Yes, there's a big hole in the loss of Nikolaj Ehlers. Yes, I have some concerns about team speed with what they've lost and what they've added. But it seems like, again, assuming no other changes get made between now and the start of the season, the Jets are almost going by let's see if we can replace Nikolaj Ehlers' lost offense by committee. Can we get enough combined goals and assists and production from Jonathan Toews and Gustav Nyquist and Tanner Pearson and Cole Koepke to replace what we're losing specifically in Ehlers, but also, Mason Appleton and Brandon Tanev, who joined them down the stretch. So, yeah, I mean, I see why some people are saying the Jets needed to do more. Did they try and do more on July 1? Absolutely they did. And I think we were given some insight into that last Friday when Kevin Cheveldayoff acknowledged that how fluid free agency is. And sometimes you try and do things and you think things are there and then they're not. That was him pulling back the curtain a little bit. The Jets were in on some things that didn't materialize. Brock Besser clearly was one of them. Brock Besser ultimately decided he wasn't going to go to market. And, that's a player the Jets were absolutely interested in. The Jets, I think, were going to be very aggressive in trying to land. So they had to pivot. And are the pivots underwhelming? We'll see. We'll see how they play out. I mean, Gustav Nyquist is 2 years removed from a career best season where he posted, 10 more points than Nikolaj Ehlers' career high. That's not to say, before people jump all over me for that, I'm not saying Gustav Nyquist is going to replace Nikolaj Ehlers in the lineup this year, but I know the Jets are hoping that there's a little more than what he produced last year that ultimately could help the team here as they go forward. So we'll see how it plays out. They've certainly gotten a little older. They've arguably gotten a little slower. But they have made some signings that I think they're hoping will make them a little deeper. And that's where some focus, I think, turns to the kids. It was interesting when I asked about the speed question last week, Remo, to Kevin Cheveldayoff. His first answer was about Brad Lambert, which said to me, opportunity is knocking for a guy like Lambert to come into camp and make an impression and maybe make the team right off the hop.
That was interesting. And you mentioned the kids. It was Jets development camp last week. What were your takeaways from development camp? I saw you had a conversation with former first-round pick Colby Barlow in the Free Press, but what did you learn from this year's edition?
Yeah, Barlow's an interesting guy because he's turning pro, one of 3 Canadian Hockey League kids in Braden Yeager and Jacob Julian. And, Barlow's a guy, Remo, who the organization remains extremely high on him. Now, his star might have faded a bit with how last season played out, or at least the start of it. I think it's fair to say he had a pretty underwhelming training camp with the Jets last year. And that carried over to the start of his junior season as he went back to the OHL. He didn't exactly light it up. And, part of that, I think he was adjusting to a new team. He had been traded. But my goodness, Colby Barlow really went on a tear in the second half, and especially in the playoffs where he was a man on a mission. And I think the Jets are hoping that's the player that they're now getting as a pro. And, he's a guy with some real pedigree, obviously a first-round pick. He's got good size. And, he's a guy that can really put the puck in the net. And so we'll see how that plays out. I don't imagine Colby Barlow makes the Jets on opening day, but, him, Braden Yeager, there's going to be some opportunities for kids like that. Guys also like Nikita Chibrikov and Parker Ford. As for, the development camp itself, it's always a bit of a fool's game to make snap judgments or whatever based on summer hockey and these guys. It's not the competition that you get even at training camp. that being said, I mean, Sasha Boumedienne, my goodness, can that kid skate? And, I think the Jets have a real good one in that young defenseman who's, of course, going to go on now to play a second year at BU, Boston University, was the youngest player in college hockey last year and did not look out of place. And that's playing against bigger, stronger, older men. I think the Jets have a real good one in him. And, between Elias Salomonson and Alphonse Frey, who also looked really good, looked like he's really muscled up a bit. The Jets have some really exciting young prospects now on the blue line to go with. I think the forwards who are maybe a little more advanced, at least the key ones, guys like Yager and Lambert and Chibrikov. But, Winnipeg's got a pretty nice prospect pool right now. And I suspect that's what we're going to see here in the coming years is some of those kids eventually push the vets out. And, Remo, just one final thought on free agency. It was interesting that the Jets have only signed guys on 1-year deals. Granted, that's partly because of who they signed. These are older players. But, it's easy to see that there is some succession planning happening and that there's almost a view that these guys are just placeholders for now. And the sooner some of these kids can push them out of the way, I imagine Jets, for example, Jets are only paying Tanner Pearson like $1 million. If a Brad Lambert or a Colby Barlow or Braden Yager or whoever shows in camp or early in the season that they are ready for more, it's not like the Jets are committed to these huge money deals with guys like Pearson and Koepke that are going to say, well, no, we got to play these guys. We've invested so much in them. Well, they haven't. These are placeholders. And so I think the Jets are in a good spot right now when it comes to their prospects and some of the guys in the pipeline. Of course, as always, you can draft well. The key is development as well. And we'll see how some of these guys develop at the pros. And to that, it's a tiny little storyline, but some of these depth signings the Jets made on July 1 and 2 and 3 with regards to guys on two-way deals, Remo, don't underestimate the value of some of the guys the Jets brought in. None of the names will blow you away, and you're not looking at that guy saying, oh my goodness, Cale Clegg, wow, can't believe we got him. That's going to help the Jets. Well, not directly, no, but guys like Phil DiGiuseppe, got the list in
Walker Dewar, was that the other one?
Yeah, Samuel Faberge, who scored
Fajimo,
43 goals in 50 AHL games 2 years ago. There's some nice depth signings. They're bringing Mason Shaw, who led the team in scoring last year, the Moose. So the fact is, there seems to be a concerted effort to surround these kids with good talent, which in the end creates a better development environment for them, which ultimately serves the Jets well.
Yeah, and be joined by Daniel Fink, play-by-play voice of the Moose after this, just detailing, the players that they brought in, because it seems like a big overhaul there for the Moose. And you mentioned the Jets contracts, just looking ahead to next season. And I do like what they're doing, signing these players to 1-year deals. You're not committing big dollars. There's a saying on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, no such thing as a bad 1-year contract. But the only forwards under contract for not 25-26, but 26-27, Scheifele, Niederreiter, Iafallo, Nemestikov. Now you have to sign Velarde and Darrin. Those will come in multi-year deals. And the UFAs, Lowry and Connor and Perfetti, an RFA. That's after this season. Any concern that Lowry and Kyle Connor, they're eligible for extensions right now? Any concern that they won't be able to get something done with those players?
None. No concern. I believe those guys are going to be Jets for life. Not unlike Connor Hellebuck, Mark Scheifele, probably Josh Morrissey. So no, and I just think for now, and look, all these guys, said as much when we talked to them at exit interview day back in May. Talked to Kevin Cheveldayoff about it. everybody said, like, if it doesn't get done on July 1 with guys like Lowry and Connor, like, don't be alarmed. I just think that the to-do list has been a long one here. And it's not to say those aren't important signings. It's just you almost have to prioritize based on timelines, right? So you had to deal with July 1 free agency. You have to deal with your own RFAs this year and arbitration filings and whatnot. But I do think, like, I'll be stunned if Kyle Connor and Adam Lowry both don't have new contracts in place by the time the new season begins in the fall. Now, does that mean they happen in August? Do they happen like the Scheifele Hellebuck signings happen, like right as training camp is getting underway? I don't know about that timing. I just think in both cases, I think there's a commitment and a willingness on all sides to get deals done and obviously extend the relationship with those really key core players. As for Cole Perfetti, I mean, yeah, he's not a UFA in a year, but obviously with the RFA status, and then he's getting closer to UFA. I mean, Cole Perfetti, we saw the development that he had this past year, and the Manitoba Miracle is probably going to be worth an extra zero on his paycheck eventually as well. I mean, that cemented him in local hockey lore. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to get to. I think now as the dust starts to settle on a really busy stretch here, Kevin Cheveldayoff will, especially once the Velarde, Samberg, and Barron situations are taken care of, that's probably when his attention turns to those matters.
Yeah, we could have a pretty stacked free agent class with Connor McDavid, Artemi Panarin, Jack Eichel, and Kyle Connor, some of the names who could become free agents on July 1 of next season. We'll have to wait and see. It will be on Connor extension watch throughout the year.
I do wonder, Remo, like if one of the spin-offs of the sharply rising salary cap, and it's expected to go up considerably now year over year after kind of a flat cap era. I do wonder if one of the negative side effects is going to be that July 1s of the future are going to be kind of like this past July 1, as in not very exciting, because more and more teams are going to lock up their big name, big ticket guys because they can, because the salary cap will allow for it. Unlike when they were in a flat cap era and you got all these guys that need raises and the cap's not budging. So how do you fit them all in? You don't. You have to move on. I just think we may be seeing it. And just look at this year, Remo, like how many guys even leading up to July 1 re-upped with their teams to come off the market. And I just think that's a sign of things to come. That's not so good for folks who want all kinds of action on July 1. I'd say it is a good thing, though, for fans of teams that want to see their, favorite players stick around and not see tons of movement every year where it's hard to get too attached to a group or to a player because you never know how long they're going to be there. So, I think it's going to create some more stability. Now, you'll always get cases like Nikolaj Ehlers, who decides that it's not about the money. And it really, I think we need to make that clear. This was not about the money. The Winnipeg Jets would have paid Nikolaj Ehlers more than the $51 million total that the Carolina Hurricanes gave him. So you'll get players like that want to change of scenery. I just think where we've seen in the past that it comes down to dollars and cents, that guys have to be cut loose. I think we're going to see less and less of that, and we'll see more players re-upping with their teams.
Yeah, the salary cap for 25-26 moving up to $95.5 million. That's $7.5 million increase. Season after for 26-27, it's going up to $104 million. That's an $8.5 million increase, and then I'll go up a $9.5 million increase to $113.5 for 27-28. And yeah, players coming up on RFAs. They need extensions for more money. Right. The UFA's pay raise. So I kind of agree with you that it does help teams keep their guys. When you look at a team, I think of Chicago, they had all these great young players. Well, you can't keep all of them because they all need extensions, and they had to make a number of trades. One of those benefited the Thrashers, getting Andrew Ladd
Right.
and Dustin Byfuglien, which eventually moved here. I know we touched on Ehlers a bit. People in chat don't want to hear about a player who left the Jets, but your biggest takeaway from his conference call on Saturday, the goodbye conference call, and the letter that he put out to fans, it just seemed like a guy who was ready for a new experience and said, hey, you know what? I did 10 years. That's the longest I've ever lived anywhere. Let's see how I can push myself to be a better player.
Yeah, and I just think ultimately it did come down to that. Now, how much did his usage, which I think has been debated to death around here, play into that? I'm sure to a degree, although again, Nikolaj Ehlers was very quick to absolve the Jets of any blame. Now, is he just being a good human and not wanting to point fingers as he leaves? Maybe. But, he didn't strike me as a guy who's bitter about how his time on ice was used here in Winnipeg. Like, there didn't seem to be a bitter bone in his body. It just was really, truly about a change. Wasn't about money. I think he's really good friends with Freddie Anderson. They're going to play together. They have played together on many international teams and events. They're going to be on the Danish Olympic team together. Freddie Anderson, Nikolaj Ehlers mentioned, was a big part in kind of recruiting him. I got to think one's not so insignificant part of this story was Nikolaj Ehlers and Nino Niederreiter are good buddies. They have the same agent. In fact, they're the only two clients of that agent, which is a bit unusual. And Nino Niederreiter loved his time in Raleigh. He still speaks fondly of it. And so I'm sure as Nikolaj Ehlers was surveying the landscape, whether it was just the quality of life, the lifestyle that you can have in Raleigh, obviously a lot different than Winnipeg, a lot quieter of a market, a lot warmer. The travel isn't as grueling, from their perspective, because you're playing so many teams. You're in such close proximity to a lot of your closest rivals. So I think that factored into it. And yeah, ultimately, I think he's not lying through his teeth when he said it just was time for a change. Now, if the Jets had won the Stanley Cup this past spring, is Nikolaj Ehlers still a Jet? Maybe he decides still that a change was needed. So yeah, it's a big loss for the Jets. And especially for an organization that I think, fairly or not, has a reputation of being a place that difficult to land free agents. But one thing, and you mentioned this earlier about the Jets, is they do have a very good track record of retaining their drafted and developed homegrown stars. Nikolaj Ehlers is one that got away, but he got away after 10 years. And, he's not a guy who demanded a trade or played his way out of town. So yeah, I think he's being extremely genuine when he speaks about his love of Winnipeg and everything about this organization. And I think he is going to miss it. Will he come to regret it? That the grass isn't always greener? Maybe. But he is going to a pretty good team and a pretty good environment that's kind of built to win now. And I think, he's going to go play for a really good coach in Rod Brindamore. There's a lot of Europeans there, guys like Freddie Anderson, his buddy, but Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov. I don't imagine his ice time or his usage is going to be a big issue. I'm guessing he'll be on the top line with Sebastian Aho and probably Seth Jarvis to start the year. And, hopefully he can stay healthy. That's one thing that's obviously been an issue. For all his talent, it's kind of remarkable that his career high is just 64 points. Like, that's a number that I'm sure the Hurricanes are hoping he can eclipse. And if he could stay healthy and play an 82-game season, I like his chances with the opportunities he's going to get. And yeah, I wish him all the best. I won't tell fans how to think, but for people who are kind of bitter or angry or feel like he he somehow stabbed the Jets in the back or did them dirty. That I don't believe that's the case. Like, could he have been clearer about his intentions and told them months ago that he wasn't going to sign? I guess. I don't believe that he had made his mind up. The fact he didn't sign at 11:01 on July 1st and waited like 3 days tells you this is a guy that was having a difficult time, and the Jets were very much in the mix. Those tearful chats he had with Scott Arniel and Kevin Cheveldayoff and Mark Chipman, I think were genuine. And one last thing, Remo, but even if he had told the Jets he wasn't re-signing, the Jets were the best team in the NHL. Were they going to move him at the trade deadline for some asset? Of course not. You use him as your own rental at that point. So, I guess, could they have gotten a 5th round draft pick? Like, if he knew that Carolina was the team he was going to sign with, could they have moved him before July 1 after the season ended, for a draft pick? I guess. But really, that's not the hill to die on, I don't think, when it comes to assessing whether you're still a Nikolaj Ehlers fan or not.
Yeah, Nikolaj Ehlers no longer a Winnipeg Jet, but plenty of great memories. Put out a very nice message on the Winnipeg Jets social media saying goodbye to the organization, the teammates, and the city. And I'm sure we'll be having conversations about trading him or not trading him, for years to come, for months ahead as we count down to the season. But Mike, it's been great having you on today. Appreciate all your awesome work there in the Winnipeg Free Press. What do you have coming up now with Toews introduced, Ehlers, free agency's over, development camp's done? What's next for you, Mike?
Well, we just take a bit of a breath here now. Got a little amateur golf that covering the Manitoba Juniors on this week, Manitoba Men's Amateur next week. So I always like to dabble in some golf coverage when the hockey kind of goes dark for a bit. So we'll have coverage of those tournaments in the paper this week. And I guess for folks who still want to vent or have Jets related topics they wish to cover, Kenny and I have our latest Free Press monthly Jets mailbag that's coming out this Sunday. So the mailbag is open. If folks want to fire some Jets-related questions our way, some of them, they're more like rants disguised as questions. But hey, we're not picky. We'll take any and all messages. So yeah, you can send folks can send them either to Kenny and me on through social media or email us, and we'll tackle your Jets questions in our mailbag this weekend, which I'm sure will be a very lively one given everything that's happened or hasn't happened.
Very nice, Mike. Thanks again for coming on. I'm looking forward to catching up with you. Well, I guess it'll be Hustler in the host chair next week, doing my best to fill in here. Thanks again, Mike.
Doing a great job, Remo, of course.
Thank you.
Enjoy the week. Take care.
Thank you, Mike. There is Mike McIntyre in the Winnipeg Free Press on social media, Mike McIntyre, WPG, and says I'm doing a great job. Well, when I have a guest like Mike who can provide that kind of insight on the Winnipeg Jets, who's been at the press conferences asking all the tough questions, great to have him on the program. But Mike alluded to it, the the Winnipeg Jets made some depth signings. Many of them could have an impact on the Manitoba Moose, have an impact on the prospects. Be joined by Dan Fink in a second on that. But first, here's Hustler.
Let me thank our friends at Royal Sports for their support of WST and remind you all that now that it is real and Jonathan Toews is a Winnipeg Jet, you can get your hands on a Toews 19 jersey at your number one fan headquarters for all your Winnipeg teams, Royal Sports at 750 Pembina Highway. They've been putting a lot of 19s on jerseys as of late, and they can do one for you. Get on down to Royal Sports today. You can check out their great bomber section as well with tons of exclusives that you won't find anywhere else. And of course, we're loving summer right now. Soccer, softball, baseball, tennis, running. Tons of great bikes, e-bikes as well. The big Yeti cooler section, all waiting for you at Royal Sports. 750 Pembina Highway. Check them out on Instagram as well, at Royal Sports Winnipeg. for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. Well, if you went to Boston Pizza last night to watch the Stampede Bowl, the game was a dud, but at least you had those ice-cold schooners, world-famous BP wings, gourmet pizzas, and all the great treats on the new summer menu available for you. Great weekend of CFL action. We got Friday Night Football tonight between the Ticats and Argos, and then BC and Montreal, and Edmonton looking for their first win. If you are heading out to catch the Canadian Football League, do it at your local Boston Pizza. And hey, staying at home, get the great taste of BP by ordering online at bostonpizza.com. All right, continuing the program, we will have marbles. We'll let you know about that in a bit. John Mattis to come, and an update from downtown with Connor Rabchak. Right now, though, let's give a big cheers on a Friday to Winnipeg's favorite local brewery, Little Brown Jug.
You train day in and day out, learning new techniques, approaching new concepts, and living out the thrill of achieving your goals. Building a craft beer is no different. While you spend your hours on the ice, we spend ours here, brewing our trademark beer. Again, and again. Here's to pushing the status quo and challenging ourselves to build something memorable. 1919 by Little Brown Jug.
Yes, Little Brown Jug had a couple of those this weekend. Love their summer mixer pack. Pick that one up at the LC. Great assortment of beers in that one. Shout out to everyone in chat who's come here to watch, to have conversations. Great seeing so many familiar names. If you are here enjoying the program, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. Tells YouTube we're putting out some great content. Maybe it'll show it to more people. We're very dependent on the almighty algorithm to put in front of some new eyeballs. And if you're here, turn on the notification bell. There could be some surprise content, or maybe you forget that we're here Monday to Friday at 1 p.m. and you'll get a little notification there on YouTube saying, hey, we're live, and you can tune in. But we've spent a lot of time talking about the Winnipeg Jets signings that we know will be at the NHL level, but they made a number of depth signings as well with the Manitoba Moose, and some young players like Brad Lambert, Chibrikov, Salamonson had another season of development in pro hockey. I'm so pleased to be joined right now by Manitoba Moose play-by-play voice Daniel Fink for some great insight on all of that. Daniel, how's it going here? July 7. How's it been for you since the end of the Manitoba Moose season?
Well, it's pretty amazing how quickly the season ends, and already you're on to next season and getting ready. Of course, following along with the Winnipeg Jets through their playoff time, and then it's teams hard at work getting ready for the next campaign. So there's never really a time where it completely stops, but able to get in maybe a little bit more relaxation time than when the team's playing every other day.
Yeah, I have to ask you, you spent some time last week out Winnipeg Jets development camp. What were your impressions of some of the young prospects that were out at Hockey for All Center?
Yeah, it's always an interesting week. I mean, you get a chance to meet some of the players, and I think that's, for my end of things, that's the most important part. And I think one of the key things about development camp is that's where you start building those relationships, whether it's between the players, between the staff and the players, things like that. So I think that's kind of one of the big things. I mean, one of the players, we were walking to an interview, said, I don't know how well I did this week. And said, I don't know if it's really about that. It's about kind of learning and figuring out things at the pro level and getting to know your new teammates, prospect teammates, however you want to say it. So I think there's a lot of success there, and a chance for guys to maybe kind of kickstart the rest of their summer, as some of them just starting to get back on the ice now. So it's a great opportunity for those prospects to learn a lot and get their impressions of the organization. For some of those guys that are looking to challenge for spots on pro rosters and things like that to start their push.
The development camp is always a great time to, in the summer, get out, see some of the next prospects, but more of a get to know you sort of thing than an evaluating, how good you are at hockey. But Dan, we haven't had a chance to recap the Moose season. I know it's July. We got sucked in the Jets playoffs and free agency, but looking back, I mean, how would you characterize the Moose 24-25 season that we just witnessed?
Well, obviously the numbers kind of speak for themselves, and that it was a tough year for the Moose, and you can't sugarcoat that. So I think for a team that had made the playoffs in that 4-5 series the year before with some of the younger players that they did have, maybe hoping to push further than they did, but that's just not how it all broke down. And I think you saw a team that struggled in a couple of aspects, but namely putting the puck in the net. And it was a year where I don't know, Remo, how many times I counted the puck sitting on the goal line and not going in. I'd never seen anything like it. So at times it seemed like they just had a wretched luck. At times they were the architects of their own bad luck. So it's just one of those seasons that I think you'll learn a lot from. And I think the players that go through that experience learn a lot from it. And in many ways, they'll grow from that. There's development and learning in all things, positive and negative. So looking forward to seeing the players that do come back, what they learn from those experiences, and how they look to push forward. And the nice thing about the American Hockey League is you can have a tough season one year and then come back the next year and be one of the best teams in the league. I'm not guaranteeing anything for the Moose here, but it is a league where things can change very quickly. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes down when we get to the fall.
Yeah, a lot of eyes here on Jets prospects: Brad Lambert, Elias Salomonsson, Nikita Chibrikov. What did you make of their development throughout the season? And we did see Chibrikov briefly with the Jets, and Brad Lambert as well.
Yeah, I think probably some frustration for Nikita Chibrikov. Obviously, like you said, got that chance with the Jets, was performing with the Moose kind of on similar pace that he was the campaign prior. And considering the Moose scoring struggles, that's something to be lauded. And then, of course, gets hurt midway through the season and misses the rest of the campaign. So who knows what the rest of that season could have looked like for Nikita Chibrikov. And certainly there was some frustration there at the injury for him. And then for Brad Lambert, I think he learned a lot about being one of the guys that gets focused on a little more, where maybe he was able to rely in some ways on different players in the lineup the season before, where we saw him as a part of the AHL's all-rookie team. Well, now he was a bit more of a focal point. So that's what a player of his ilk needs to learn when you are one of those big skill guys. So it's certainly a process for those forwards that you saw them taking those steps, and going to be a big summer for those guys. They want a challenge for spots on the Winnipeg Jets. They want to make that push. So what are they going to bring in the fall to try and make decisions difficult and force their way into a roster spot? And then on Elias Salomonsson, obviously we knew that coming in that this was a prospect that the Jets thought very highly of, but you never know how it's going to go until they get into the American Hockey League. And that transition from Europe in so many ways is so difficult, not just for the on-ice aspect, but the off-ice aspect. And I thought you saw a player that really took a lot of strides throughout the season and learned a lot. So it was a lot of fun to watch Salomonsson kind of grow throughout that season, and very intriguing to see where he comes back in the fall. And that's always the exciting thing about these prospects, is there's that unknown, right? And whether you want to look at that unknown as these are the greatest players ever and they're definitely going to step in and be massive contributors at the NHL level, or if you're taking the more measured approach, as we all know I tend to, what are they going to show you? What are those next steps? So it's always a lot of fun to see how these players grow over an off season and where they come in at the fall.
Yeah, one player who joined near the end of the season was Kieran Walton, a draft pick from last year at the draft in Vegas. Throughout your time as working with the Moose, what have you noticed from how prepared these young players are making the jump from junior to the end or to the pro level?
Well, I mean, even as somebody who worked in junior a while ago in Regina, it is amazing to see over the past decade plus the change in these players and the pro mentality that they walk in with, even coming from juniors. So even just they're more polished in interviews, the way they have worked out, the physical preparedness of some of these players. Now they're still young players, and that still comes with the need to develop physically. And I think a guy like Kieran Walton, you see that a little bit. He's got that big lanky frame, and you wonder where it could be in a few years, where once he fills out things like that. And you see that with guys like Jacob Julian as well, these big tall guys that still need to kind of fill out into their frames. So seeing where players are now and just how ready they are and just how professional they are, even at an amateur level, is really impressive. And for Kieran, I think it was, and for all these players that really come in and get that chance to come in on an amateur tryout at the end of the season, it can be a really eye-opening experience, and I think really valuable for them to see what it's like at that next level, especially for these big guys where, they can kind of bully their way around in the junior ranks. You can't do that at the pro level where everybody is close to 200 pounds and is maybe 25, 26 years old and in their physical prime. It's a lot different out there on the ice. So I think it's eye-opening for them, very valuable to show players like Kieran Walton where they need to get to, Colby Barlow the season before, what they need to do to take those next steps to be ready to jump into the pro game and not have to maybe spend that first little while completely fresh into it.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, how prepared you see development camps, stuff like that, preparing them for the jump when they do make it pro. Now, we had NHL free agency last week, but I imagine a number of the moves made will trickle down and have an impact with the Moose. But first, some of the departures. Eric Dubois, longtime assistant coach, Captain Dominic Toninato, Axel Jonsson-Fjallby, Dylan Coughlin, and Simon Lundmark. And coming in, you have a goalie from Winnipeg, Isaac Poulter, defenseman Cale Clegg, Phil DiGiuseppe, Calder Cup champion, Walker Duer, Samuel Fagmo, Mason Shaw, and Alex Worthington. What do you make of the changes here on the Moose for next season?
Yeah, I mean, great to see Mason Shaw return to the organization. That's kind of working backwards here on the signings, but great to see him return to the organization. He led the team in scoring, was a valuable leader for this team last season through a tough campaign. So great to see him remain around. And like you're saying, these are all trickle down things. So who knows how it will all shake out in the fall. But when you add talent like Samuel Fagemo, who has the most goals out of any AHL player since he joined the league in 2021, that's always a valuable thing, especially when you look at the Moose the past couple seasons, struggled scoring goals a little bit. So to possibly have that player in the lineup or a pure goal scorer that maybe finds his way onto the Jets. So certainly some exciting additions. Phil DiGiuseppe has been a thorn in the side of the Moose for years, ever since he was playing with the Charlotte Checkers back when they were in the Central Division. And of course, more recently with the Abbotsford Canucks, and brings that championship pedigree with him as well after, as you mentioned, winning the Calder Cup with the Abbotsford Canucks this past season. So some interesting additions. Cale Clegg, a player who's certainly familiar with Manitoba after playing his junior hockey in Brandon, and was watching him torch the Pats back in the day when he was a Wheat King. So certainly coming off a career best season for Clegg. He had 10 goals on the campaign. So it's certainly some interesting adds to the organization. That depth is so important, and the Jets saw that during the postseason. I mean, you commonly this time of year is when you see folks going, "Oh, who's that? Who's that? Good, we signed this depth player," across social media. Well, in the playoffs, we saw Dominic Toninato and Jared Anderson-Dolan perform admirably in the postseason for the Winnipeg Jets. You never know when these guys are going to get into the lineup. So it's so important to have that depth all the way through your group. And that filters down into the American Hockey League, where you have some of these guys pushing your prospects and helping them learn the ropes. So certainly interesting. And speaking of pushing prospects, I mean, obviously a lot of talk about Dominic DiVincentis, Thomas Milic. Well, who's going to earn the most time? Well, now you've got Isaac Poulter in there as well. So you've got kind of a three-way battle for playing time. So that's certainly something that we'll be having our eyes on as we get in towards training camp and things like that. So certainly it's been an exciting couple of weeks over free agency for the Moose as you start to put together those combinations of, who could filter down, who might stick, what does that change for somebody else that was in the lineup, things like that. So it's certainly interesting times, and got to wait a couple months yet before we see how it all plays out.
Yeah, we'll wait and see how the roster shakes out, but it seems like they've had some more veteran players. And do you think, that will help some of the younger players who could be on the Moose this season develop? And you think the expectations for next season are a bit higher than what we just witnessed in the previous one?
I would think so. I think when you have a tough season like that, you want to rebound quickly. You don't want that to become the norm. So you look at kind of the mix of players like we've just been talking about throughout the depth, those younger players whether they make their way onto the Jets and that pushes somebody to the Moose, or they start their time with the Moose, things like that. There's so many different permutations, but when you see all these depth signings for the Winnipeg Jets, you can't help but get excited about what you might see in the fall for the Moose. So I think there's the expectation that the Moose would take a step forward, things like that. But once they drop the puck, all bets are off. So it's certainly an exciting time throughout the summer. You get to think about what will be and get to do that in the nice weather, things like that. And once it starts cooling down, you get to see how it actually plays out on the ice. So certainly very intriguing couple of weeks here for the Moose, and looking forward to seeing what does indeed happen.
Yeah, July 7. Still got, a month and weeks to go, but we are having fun talking about hockey. So what's next for you here as we wrap up development camp? And I don't know, got like 2 months here before we start thinking about on ice stuff. I'm already penciling in what I think will be Jets Fan Fest. So you can tell I'm working ahead.
Well, there's plenty to come over the summer, right? I mean, we're kind of into more AHL signing season as well, so presumably we'll have some new Moose signings to percolate through here over the next little bit. You got things like the schedule releases and stuff like that should be on the horizon here pretty quickly. Promotional schedule is always an exciting time, so plenty to come here over the summer as we get a little closer to kind of that late July, early August, where things in hockey really do kind of seemingly quiet down for a little bit before kicking it into high gear in mid-September once those prospects report.
Yeah, schedule release. All right, I'm ready. And promo, we want to see who the bobbleheads are. Some great giveaways from the Moose this past season. As we wrap up, Dan, I want to ask you, as a play-by-play guy, do you have one of those sheets for the game that you prepare where you write on everything and have all the notes? I've seen some of the other ones. I don't know what goes into that, but what's your preparation like for one of those when you're calling a Moose game?
Yeah, mine's probably a little more minimalist than some guys. I have an 8.5 by 11 sheet. Some guys have like the full 11 by 17, and they write everything out. Mine's typed up. We have to usually get the lineups ahead of time, so we are able to kind of get that all together. But mine's just an 8.5, 11 folded in half, and then I have a bunch of incomprehensible shorthand on it to fit as much information as I can, previous season stats, things like that, notable accomplishments, where guys went to school or where they went to or played their junior hockey, stuff like that. So it's a little prep sheet. In the AHL, where for the Moose, we have a lot of similar opponents, so it gets a little easier as the season goes on, and then just swap guys in and out, pop them up and down the lineup, things like that. So luckily, because I do both things with the communications side, I get to do a lot of my prep, just getting ready. All of our materials are scout notes, media notes, things like that. So that all goes hand in hand, and so a lot of it sits up here going in, but I've got my packs of notes and things like that when I need to do some diving for some extra stats, which is always a good time. And then usually have Austin Siragusa or Frankie Benvenuti ready to toss me an extra stat or two if I can't look it up on the fly, toss into our group chats. I need to know this, and usually somebody can help me out with that. So those guys are good for it.
Perfect, Dan. Well, it's always great having you on. I'm enjoying your board game background. Hopefully those are getting some time here out of the box.
Even in summer, I wish I had a little more time to get them off the shelf. So
the shelf, yeah, this summer. Perfect time to hit up the board game. So, Dan, thanks again. Great talking. Hopefully we can connect again soon.
We'll talk to you soon.
There he is, Manitoba Moose play-by-play voice, Daniel Fink. Thanks so much to Dan for joining me today, giving us some insight on the Moose next season. Winding down the show, I'm in for Hustler. Thank you, everyone who's stuck around here, approaching the 2-hour mark as we wind it down. And I do have to give a shout out to Breezy Bend. All WST golf reports this year brought to you by Breezy Bend, home of this year's Manitoba Open. Thinking about making Breezy your long-term golf home? Contact Corey Johnson at the clubhouse or visit breezybend.ca for more info and to get on the waiting list. And we did mention Manitoba Open. It's coming up this year, manitobaopen.com for more information. But at the top of the website there, click Pro-Am, and they're looking for golfers for Wednesday, August 20. Now, not cheap, but $4,000 for a team of 4. You do get morning, afternoon, tea times, 2 meals, and it is a chance to play 18 holes with 2 PGA Tour Americas players, unlimited on-course beverages, and all players receive a tailor-made Spider putter, $4.99 value. So that actually sounds like a pretty awesome experience in support of the True North Youth Foundation. And hey, maybe you're playing with the next U.S. Open champion, because JJ Spawn was at, what was it called there? It was called the Players Champion or Players Cup like 10 years ago. And JJ Spawn was there. And this past year, he's the U.S. Open champion. I remember Brian Munns played around with JJ Spawn there 10 years ago. So, hey, you're playing with the next up-and-coming pros there at the Manitoba Open coming up third week of August. The Winnipeg Goldeyes, they're back home this week. Great chance to get out to the ballpark. Sioux Falls in town starting tomorrow. Then a weekend series with Kansas City. The promos this week, Thursday night, the Shirt Off Our Backs game. Friday night fireworks. Tickets, 204-982-BASE or WinnipegGoldeyes.com. Sorry, I think it's just Goldeyes.com. And hey, we had a great time. Shout out to everyone who joined us at last month's WST patio party. Blue Cross, great location to host your large gathering. Check out that patio area that we went to in left field, right on top of the bullpen. It was awesome. It was awesome. And Assiniboia Downs live racing returns tomorrow and Wednesday. We've had some great nights so far this year. Get out to Assiniboia Downs. They're open every day with VLTs, great dining options, free admission, free parking. If you're planning on attending the races, make a reservation in the clubhouse dining room and enjoy the world-famous prime rib buffet and make a night of it. And don't forget to check them out on YouTube during live racing. Kurt Stretch, they're giving you their picks. Hustler and I have ours on race days here. And back at it tomorrow. Can't wait. Hustler's got a bit of a lead on me in our picks championship. And we're going to check out the Cool Bet lines as we wind down the show. Let me put myself in this box here so we can check out the Cool Bet lines. Baseball, I've been all in. I know people here watching the Blue Jays. We'll try to get some Blue Jays segments this week because they're in first place in the AL East Division. First time since 2015, you can say that. And they're playing the White Sox. Minus 169 seems low for the White Sox, who've been a miserable franchise. CFL, are those lines out? Jeff and I will cover those on CFL 110 tomorrow. Just an early look. Saskatchewan -5 favorite at home to Calgary. Interesting. Hamilton -4.5 at home to Ottawa. I don't know. I'd maybe lean Ottawa there, but it seems like you can't stop Kenny Lawler. And Edmonton coming off their first win, going up against Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions. They're BC's favored in that one on the road, 3.5 points. Checking out the futures for CFL. How have the odds changed? No, I track them every week. Not much. Montreal's the Grey Cup favorite, plus 240. I think part of that is the division they play in. Toronto's taking a step back with their roster changes and injuries. Ottawa, they didn't have Drew Brown to start. He did play yesterday. And who's the other one? Hamilton. Yeah, I don't see either of those teams as threats. Saskatchewan's the West favorite, plus 325. Bombers not far behind, plus 375. BC at plus 1,000 seems like decent odds. You think Nathan Rourke can figure it out? But hey, he's never beaten the Bombers before. Wimbledon. I know it's on. I haven't tuned in. Haven't tuned in too much. We got MLB number of games today. I mentioned the Blue Jays as favorites. And check out CFL 110 tomorrow, where Jeff and I will go through all the odds and all of the top stories around the week. Hey, I was going to wind it down. I still have the Kevin Cheveldayoff clips that we never got to. Just him. Here's Winnipeg Jets GM Kevin Cheveldayoff talking about his approach to free agency this year, knowing that they had already signed Jonathan Toews.
Well, I think it gave maybe a little bit of clarity as to which you're able to say, okay, does this kind of player fit? Does this kind of player fit? What should we be looking for? And complementary to anytime you can fill in a box, a major box on your team like that, then you get a better sense of direction. Now, free agency is always an interesting time. It's very, very fluid, and sometimes you think something's there and it's not.
There's Kevin Cheveldayoff. And yeah, I think Mike alluded to that comment at the end there where he says free agency. You think something's there and then it's not. And we know the Winnipeg Jets have had trouble attracting free agents. They have signed some, but not the big fish like you see Vegas doing the big sign and trade there with Mitch Marner. And a lot of talk about Jonathan Toews. Is there concern about him being away for 2 years and coming back? And Chevy was asked if there's maybe less concern with a player like Jonathan Toews and his resume.
Well, I think he was true to himself and kind of not announced a comeback, but announced that he was going to try to make a comeback well in advance of him making that final decision. And we had known some people at Arizona State that had seen him skate and stuff like that, and talked about how the progression was happening and everything. But he is. When elite athletes, they hold themselves to a different standard, and they are wired differently, both mentally and certainly physically. So, again, the first thing is just excited to hear that he feels he's healthy, and then to hear that he wants to play. That was an exciting moment there. Now, I can't tell you that. It was just smooth sailing, to try to get him back. Obviously, there was lots of teams, I think, that threw their hat in the ring, but we were confident, that we would be someone that he would want to play for.
There's Kevin Cheveldayoff talking about Jonathan Toews and the layoff, and I do agree. I think being off for 2 years allows the body to heal. You're working with the best trainers, best doctors on training optimally. So we'll see how it goes for him and how he looks. And we won't know until the puck drops, so we can sit here and debate it all summer. And last one here I'll play on Chevy. He was asked if it's a bit of a gamble putting so many eggs into the Jonathan Toews basket.
I don't know that it's a gamble. I think it's it's certainly an opportunity. I think, in this game here, athletes that do hold themselves to a different, a level of accountability, can do great things. But it's, again, I think it's going to take some time. I think, the biggest thing for us, and everyone says, it's going to be second line center, it's going to be third, and fourth. It's like in this game today, I don't really know. If someone says define a second line center. For me, in the way that obviously the lines get structured, and it's who goes over the boards first, who goes over the boards second, who goes over third, how are they matching up, how do they make other players around them better? That's what a coach, I guess, has some fun or some excitement. And, again, I know the coaches will end up having some meetings, down the line here now that they know pretty much who's in the organization, and those are the kind of conversations that they're going to have, along the way.
All right, there it is, Kevin Cheveldayoff. That was Friday after the big press conference. Family, friends, sports media, news media, lunch for everyone after, jersey presentation. Some nice photos there, and I think a lot of excitement about Jonathan Toews. As we do wind down the program now, I do have to give a shout out. It wasn't a sports event that caught my attention on the weekend, but it was, I don't know anyone out there who watched the Black Sabbath final show in the beginning. What an incredible, event put on by Sharon and Ozzy Osbourne for Ozzy Osbourne's last show. And it was like, you have the MLB All-Star Game coming out. This was the All-Star Game of metal. All-time greats performing. You had super groups, all-time rock acts, ending with who? Guns N' Roses, Metallica, Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath, all on stage, all together the first time in 20 years. Amazing. You have this technology where, you can just stream this. They put it on sale. I think it was $20. Apparently sold 5 million of those. So that would be 100 million in revenue for them. The highlight for me, the Steven Tyler returning to the stage, playing Whole Lotta Love with Tom Morello, Chad Smith, and others. You had Sammy Hagar in the supergroups, covers of all the Aussie songs. And these are songs that I hadn't listened to in a while, some of these Aussie ones, but I've been putting it on today, getting ready for the show, and I loved it. And Hockey Mom says they're all old. And yes, the one thing's for sure about this is a sign that we are all getting very old as we watched, 70, was he 75 Aussie on his last show? And I remember seeing them 20 years ago at the Winnipeg Arena, and he seemed old then, but everyone's getting up there. So enjoy these rock acts while you still can. So many legends together on stage performing back to back. What a show that was. There's clips floating around online. I think you can still pay and watch the replay. Would strongly recommend. Or hey, you could just put on, sometimes you see acts now playing songs that they wrote 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's not the same. Just put on the original record if that does it for you. Anyways, I'll be back tomorrow. Great show coming up tomorrow. Me still in the host chair. I'm going to be joined by Drew Mindell of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I love bringing Drew on. I know he's got some hot takes about something I can poke him with. John Hodge of 3 Down Nation. And I think it's going to be Ken. I got to confirm if it's Ken and Murat. One will be Tuesday, one will be Wednesday for Ken and Murat. Anyways, for Connor, but Connor's not here. He's out of town. Hustler's out of town. For me, Michael Remis, this has been another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching and commenting. I'll send you over to Hacksaw. See ya.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.